There it is. I got that old magic back. Kikank. Yeah. Wait. Whoa. Hold on. Hi, Barbie. Yo,
It's
what?
Barbenheimer.
Yo.
There's Heimer.
Yeah, we need a modesty cloth for your Barbies. Welcome back to P2P, Pencil to Pencil, live in stereo. It is Wednesday, 8 p.m. And do you know where your cartoonists are? I am JAMAR Nicholas.
Streets.
I'm JAMAR Nicholas, cartoonist, and in the new traditional book space that I'm in, they call me an author illustrator. Well, hello. Leon the Extraordinary is in stores now. It's the first book in my series at Scholastic under the graphics imprint. Just released the street date, the book birthday for the next volume of Leon. Leon, Worst Friends Forever, drops May 7th, 2024. Pre-order now wherever books are sold. Welcome to the live stream. I got a little heart for that. That's what's up. I would be remiss if I did not introduce one of our co-captains and co-conspirators here. He is, do the belt motion. There it is, the world heavyweight champion of webcomics. He is known in these streets as Stone Cold Steve Conley. What's up, Steve Conley?
Hello, everybody. Good to see you. A little disclaimer: I'm under the weather, and I'm hopped up on meds. A different variety than I'm usually here on the stream with. And if I bail early, it's because David. Thank you so much. That was a little bit. Well, we're demonetized, so that's the point.
Yeah.
But I write and draw the webcomic The Middle Age. I also make TTRPG content like Intoximancy and Death Dealing, and the placeholders live now for the next RPG project I'm doing, which is called Metadomain. It's a cleric thing. You go to prayershandbook.com, and you can sign up to be notified when it goes live sometime in September. But the focus is getting that done and getting back on the Middle Age. But I would be remiss. I would be in remission if I didn't introduce the Tower of Power, the man of the hour, too sweet to be sour, the maestro of mark making, Mr. Mike Manley.
Hello, Mike.
Hello, everybody.
Mike, what do you do?
I, in the traditional comic strip space, I'm known as a comic strip artist. I draw the Phantom and Judge Parker, and I've worked in comics animation for just shy of 40 years.
Wow. Well, Mike, it hasn't been that long.
Yeah. 40
Wow.
years. This next year will be 40 years, although actually this fall is the anniversary of when I almost got my first job. When I went to Marvel the first time, and they were going to give me a job, but they didn't want me to take it back to Michigan with me. So knowing things now, I probably could have stayed and done it. Maybe even worked in the bullpen, because a lot of people used to work in the bullpen back then.
Right. But you weren't in the East Coast then, right? You were still in the Midwest. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's always such an interesting story. I mean, if you did a Freaky Friday and put current timeline Mike Manley in that same situation, you could have just worked remote. And that wasn't even really a term back then. Or at least not the way you consider it now.
Yeah. I mean, I think in order for them at that time, in order for you to work remote, which people did, you would have had to do enough work that they would have trusted you, so you would have started with fill-in issues and things till they could see, oh, okay, we give this guy work, he turns it around on time, okay, But yeah. Very, very different world too, because that was before faxes and anything like that. So you did everything through the mail. That was actually before FedEx.
Yeah, wow.
I think that was before FedEx.
Pray tell, I've read in the scrolls stories about a facsimile machine.
Yeah.
Ship it
That
to the
was,
stove in the cave, yes.
I don't know. I think I remember people started using FedEx around 84, maybe 85. I remember, I think in 85 using FedEx.
Wow.
I'd have to go back and actually Google and see when FedEx started, but I don't think I started using FedEx until 85, maybe.
So what was before that? Was it just it was like the post or UPS or?
You mailed it in, or usually what you did is you went in. You went in, because
like courier, or you went in yourself, right?
Well, I would go up because New York's only 90 minutes from Philly. Go down 30th Street Station, take Amtrak up to New York, go up to Marvel. You turn stuff in, walk around a little bit, see people, maybe go to lunch with the editor, get the next script, come home, right? And and then there was also a messenger service,
right?
Same day messenger service in 30th Street Station, which I used quite a bit in my early days, where I'd pull all-nighter, and there were 2 trains 2 times a day, go down 30th Street Station, you meet the courier. I think it was like $100 or $97 or something, but they actually and there was a lot of firms that used it, and so the courier would go up, and then they had a bunch of people in New York, and they fan out and deliver these packages, so I could send stuff up twice a day. I had 2 opportunities, or FedEx, or go up, but that's basically how everybody did it.
Wow. David Peterson, and hello to one of our chatty Cathys, David Peterson. David Peterson, star of Mouse Guard fame, who's a regular here at Pencil to Pencil. Just, I don't want to block your head too much from on the screen, Mike, but David just talked about hearing stories about artists back in the day driving their art in, getting in a car accident, and then leaving the scene to make sure their work got into the office on time.
Make sure there's no victims. Pages got to get in. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a different world, and deadlines were also different too, because now it used to be that if you were 12 weeks from shipping, you were in trouble, right?
Yeah.
I am sure that there is no book at any major company that's probably coming in 12 weeks from shipping. It's probably like a week from shipping, and to me, the ironic thing, I was even talking to Brett Blevins about this the other day, is you remember all those deadlines, all that pressure, and you were still 12 weeks away. DCA had what they called the hot list. So if your book was below 12 weeks from shipping, you were on the hot list. And when you got down to about 8 weeks, which was 2 months, man, there'd be like, where are the pages? Where are the pages? We're taking pages. We're taking pages, right? And now, I could literally turn in a job this week. Next week it would be printed and going to the distributor. Technology has improved the speed at which things are produced, but it has not improved people's deadlines. Because you were actually afraid to be late. You were afraid if you were late, they'd take another issue from you, right? They'd go ahead and schedule a fill-in. You're not fast enough, which is one of the reasons why they actually ended up being inkers. Because there weren't as many inkers in the 50s. Few. But inkers became a main thing because there were guys who were really good at fast at penciling. And so it would be better to split the teams up.
Oh, wow.
Right. So that's one of the reasons why inking became a thing, especially in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s,
So that's kind of like of what we all now know about how the early industry worked. One of the whole reasons that inkers existed was to make the stuff dark enough to print.
Right. Or, like there would be a studio. So Kirby would pencil stuff. And supposedly in the beginning, he would pencil it and he would ink it. He would actually go and do all the contours. Then they would give it to somebody else and they would actually go and do the blacks or the hay, the rendering, as
they called it hay.
They called it hay, yeah. Especially like the Simon Kirby. If you look at their stuff, the way there was like feathering and the way
it was feathered, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it was really. You see the same thing now if you look at any of the manga studio, artists from Japan. They have like a whole studio of people to produce any episode of anything that you read because they have to produce so many pages, like in Shonen Jump, right? So you've got the main artist who draws all the figures and may indicate a background. Then they got a person that draws the background.
Right.
Then the main artist may ink the figures, but they don't ink anything else. Then maybe they go back and do little touches, but it's really broken down to. Remember, we were watching that one night. We were watching that one.
The man bin we were watching.
Right. Yeah. And there was like 6 or 7 people in that room that was probably no bigger than my studio.
Yeah, so just for people start asking weird questions, the man bin is a I think it's like a Japanese documentary type series by who? What's the mangaka that does it? Is it
Urasawa?
Urasawa,
yeah.
Who does 20th Century Boys and all that, is a master mangaka who had this great idea, which I really want to steal at some point, of going into other mangaka studios and setting up cameras. And this, like, basically watching them work for a week, and then he'll meet up with them later, and they kind of watch it together. And one of the interesting things about that is usually, and we all know this, most cartoonists don't know how they look while they're working. It's almost like how athletes watch tape. Like you always veer left every time you get the ball handed off to you. Oh, I got to work on. You know what I'm saying? So watching these two people look at the work and. A lot of the cartoonists is like, oh, wow, I never realized I do this or whatever. But what Mike's referring to is one of the mangakas who, and a lot of them, the Japanese studio is set up that the main person is somewhere in the room and there's assistants everywhere.
Right.
And it's almost like a beehive of activity. So I'm sorry, I just had to put that precursor in there.
Yeah, it's really sort of fascinating to watch because it's the only way to be able to produce that volume of work, and it's sort of institutionalized. It's just the way they do it. We used to do it here in the 40s and the 50s and the 30s. You would have a group of assistants, like Simon and Kirby or Will Eisner. There were various studios where there were a bunch of people. Somebody did lettering. Somebody did. Somebody wrote the story, somebody laid it out. Right. Somebody might lay it out, and another person would pencil it, another person inked it, or one person would, like I said, like Kirby would outline it and ink, and then somebody else would put the blacks on it. I mean, they really had a whole system to be able to produce, and I mean, there were way more comics back in the old days than there are now. Way more. There was so many comics on the newsstand.
Kirk's pencil sounds like a chain gang.
Yeah. But that was the way everybody sort of learned the trade, right? You came in, you were an assistant, you helped, you see how somebody, that's how it's done.
Right.
Supposedly I think Joe Kubert started as a kid, I think in Will Eisner's studio. He started like 12, 13 years old, right?
You can't do that now.
No. Well, you know,
Just say it.
I mean, you probably could have a 12 or 13-year-old, but it's sort of unlikely that you would have a 12 or 13-year-old that would want to do comics now. And then their mom and dad would have to come over and,
Yeah,
the whole world is just sort of arranged differently.
Yeah, you can't do that, man. But maybe to what I think is a really interesting point, and we've talked about this for several episodes, is the idea of mentorship. And Mike could talk about his his project that we're trying to get going, and just I think that is a lost part of cartooning at this day and age, because I think information is so accessible. I also think not everybody's great at knowing what to do with this information. It's almost what do they call that? Frozen by choice, Steve, or whatever that phrase is.
Analysis paralysis.
Yeah, analysis paralysis. There's so much that I guess you don't have to think so hard about it. You don't do anything.
Right.
So before all the internet stuff, I would have given my right ear to be somebody's assistant in the studio.
And goes.
Right. But now it's kind of like, I don't even think if that was an option to a young amateur cartoonist, that they would even want that, because, well, I could just do it myself. And that's what people tell themselves. It's not necessarily true. But, I think the idea of learning from a master or stepping
I think
up.
it's DIY now, right? I mean, it's like that whole thing blew up over the last 30 years, and now, I mean, you got videos on how to make a grilled cheese sandwich, and I mean, anything you could think of, video to show you how to do it. But I think one of the things that you gain by working with a more experienced artist, there's a lot of things that are between the panel borders, so to speak. When you watch a video, you don't see everything that came before. You don't see everything that came after. You don't see all the connections. You just see this little snippet, like a little
Right.
frame of time.
Right.
And it also tends to eliminate the learning curve, because you see perfection, right? When you watch somebody, you see perfection. You don't see the 72 pieces of paper that they crumbled up and threw on the floor, you don't see anybody get stuck. You don't see anybody ruin anything. Part of learning as an artist is the mistakes. And one of the things I really came away with, I would say, going back to college, is I think beforehand I would always think if you were erasing is a mistake. But actually erasing is part of drawing. Like if you draw something and you might adjust it, you might erase it and go over it and erase it. And like a piece of clay, you sort of shape it. And I think most people think of erasing as actually a negative thing.
Like a failure.
Right. Yeah. But I think actually erasing is part of the creative process, right? It's all part of the whole.
Yeah, being good enough to know it's wrong.
Right. And being kind of brutal about it.
Yeah. And yeah, because also you're like, well, I'll have to do it again. This will take more time. Yeah, for sure.
And to that, I think that's an interesting little thing to talk about, because there's a couple of little steps that happen along the way with a lot of cartoonists or a lot of artists. And I know when I was in high school, I went to a performing arts high school here in Philly. One of the things that our drawing teacher taught us day one, freshman year, was get a hardbound sketchbook. And part of that was you had to kind of turn in your sketchbook at the end of the semester to get graded, and you were supposed to draw on it daily. Get into the habit of drawing all the time. And of course, everybody BS through their thing or stood up for 2 nights before, the end of the thing.
Scribble.
Well, I'm going to draw this flower. Okay, they all look the same exact.
Pencil hardness to make it seem like it was done over different days.
Everybody BS that or tried to finesse it. But one of the things that she said at the very beginning of this is that you can't cut or rip out any pages. The mistakes are just as important as the successes. You know what I'm saying? And that was a really valuable lesson. And, it's just it's all part of the journey to screw up. And just like what you guys were saying, and being confident in erasing, because, a lot of times with young cartoonists, you're just happy that you drew something.
Right.
Now you want me to erase it because it's wrong?
Right.
Yo, get out of here.
Right.
That took me 5 days. I'm not erasing
Right.
nothing.
Well, part of the problem when you're young is everything's precious. Effort is more strenuous, right? If you sat there and you drew that splash page and there's 100 guys fighting, if the composition of the story point is wrong, the idea of abandoning that effort is it's like too much, right? It's and I always say, well, you can keep that page, you can keep that drawing, you can keep what you did, but if it's not working, it's not working. That is a barrier many people never fully get through. If you're going to be a professional that really has command of your skill, you are brave enough to toss something that you put a day or 2 or 3 or what. If it's not working, it's not working, and you're willing to abandon what is not working, and it actually makes you stronger. But yeah, a lot of times, when you're teaching, somebody brings up something and you point out, well, this is working, but this is not working. Overall, what you're trying to communicate is not working. Of course, the young artist, the young creative, knows what they're trying to say. They know everything, but of course, that doesn't mean that the person who's looking at it sees that, right?
Yeah.
Right. You have a different. Your eyes see something different at that age.
And then so there's a lot of lawyering, a lot of closing arguments. Well, you see, and it's like.
Well, and again, I think another thing is I always try to put myself in the shoes of the layman or the person who's just starting out, because I remember how frustrating things were. Like, yo, how'd you make Colossus look like metal? How'd you make him shine, yo? This is sorcery.
Mm-hmm.
Are things like, the less things that you have done or drawn, the more more precious those things are. Right. So when you get to the point, keeping a sketchbook and just messing up in it daily makes things not so precious. So you're more apt to erase something because you can make more of them. So I think I think it's an endurance exercise also.
Also, I think it's when we talk about the layman or the hobbyist or whatever, I think if you have to really enjoy drawing beyond a distraction, right? You really have to be a zealot, and you have to enjoy it in a way that the civilian who might do it as a hobby, but then you get tired and you put it away and you go do something else. If you're going to do it enough to get good enough to produce a body of work and a consistent body of work, you can't do it casually. And that is something that's just individual, but, you have to be able to abandon work, and it just makes you stronger. It just makes you a stronger artist if you could, because part of the thing is too that, when you're in school, maybe that's 4 years. But then after that, you still have to grow and get better, and the only way you can do that is through self-assessment, being able to be self-critical and look at your work. And if you can't say no to yourself, then you really can't progress. You sort of stay stuck.
Well, Steve, were you going to say something?
No, I think that goes back to like to 10,000 hours. Like there's no shortcut for that. And filling up a book is a good way to get those out, is a good quantifiable way to get to those hours. You know, you got to just put the time in. There's just no shortcut. You know, I mean, some people are going to, there are naturals. There are people who are like on day one are going to be, you know, amazing out of the gate. Like, rumored that Frazetta was one of those. But I mean, still, he was better 10,000 hours later.
But you know, Frazetta put a lot of time in.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I think I've told the story before that when he started, he was drawing Tarzan-like characters, and then he went and he did started doing like civilian stuff, and he was getting feedback from the editors that he needed to. This is stuff that L. Williamson told me, that he needed to improve his, you know, drawing people in suits and stuff like that, drawing shoes. So supposedly, what he did is he had a pair of wingtips that he got a sketchbook and one weekend did nothing but drawings of those shoes. And then by, you know, Monday or two, whatever, after he did all those drawings, he could draw a shoe, right? Because the only reason why you do a bad drawing is because you don't have the information.
Right.
Right. And he supposedly did that with abridgment books. But he was that kind of guy who would sit down and. So he had great facility, but he also practiced. Right. And I think that's the thing that's missing and is easily lost, especially when you watch videos, because you just, again, you see the performance, but you don't see all the before, you don't see all the connections. It just looks like, oh, you know, I sit down and I know this anatomy, and if I watch this video, it somehow equates me drawing the arm.
Right. And there's something nice to know that it took even Frazetta at that much work to get shoes right. Right. Because it means half of those are terrible. So,
right.
And it's good to know that, you know, I found that was very comforting when I started, was knowing that, oh, I'm supposed to do bad drawings first. That's how I get to the good ones. So if this is a bad one, I didn't feel bad about it. I felt like, okay, cool. This is a step to get to where I have to go. And I swear that was part of the fuel that kept me going, because so much of my stuff was so bad.
Right. I mean, I think when you're younger and you look at one of your heroes and you look at one of their early drawings and you go like, oh, well, that's not so good. You know, that's kind of weird or wonky or whatever. It does give you hope that, you know, because I mean, a lot of, again, one of the other thing is people romance this thing, you know, like, oh, this person was a genius. You were born a genius. You know, oh, you're so people always, you're so talented. You know, they say stuff like that.
Maybe it's Maybelline.
Right. Which is sort of like, well, maybe the people, the God, the whoever, the maker who handed out talent today said, you get a lot. Oh shit, I don't have any left in the bag. Sorry, buddy. I'll try to catch you next time. It's like so arbitrary for that. And I think that it's fine for the layman to sort of think that way, but you can't really follow that logic as an artist, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things about the time we live in is people watch all these videos and they get the idea that they're actually learning, but you don't really learn as an artist through observation. Totally learn. You have to put the other part in, the drawing, the doing part. Right?
Mm-hmm.
The cooking. It's like, you know, you gotta you still got to fill the sketchbook. And you know something, we used to get sketchbooks that we would give out to kids. It's amazing how scary a book full of white paper is for people. Like nobody opens it up and draws on the first page. They're like, you know, they go like somewhere in the middle and then they draw like a little head or something. I guarantee you, most students, when you look at their sketchbooks, the first couple of pages are not. It's like, no. It's like, it's almost, what do they call it? When people go to the doctor, their blood pressure goes up. They call white coat hypertension. Like when you're in the, you're kind of nervous, you know, and you know your system is kind of keyed up. And I think with a lot of young artists, I witnessed that. You give them here's a new sketchbook from Blick, and they're like, give me a piece of loose leaf paper that's all bent up.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a very interesting phenomenon. Oh, but you know what? I didn't introduce what we're doing here tonight, you guys. 30 minutes in. So this might be one of the purest forms of what happens when you get a bunch of expert cartoonists on the phone. This is almost like a fly on the wall episode where you always wanted to know kind of what a bunch of cartoonists talk about.
Or when we Zoom with each other.
Right. This is, guys, episode, what is this? The part 5 episode?
Part 5.
So we have been kind of continuing a discussion from a couple of episodes past about a couple of subjects. I think it's just kind of snowballed into us just kind of talking shop again with a funny title. And we don't really have a form or function of this, but I'm hoping that some of the people in the chat will ask us some questions. We've already shot 30 minutes just talking about, you know, erasers. So it's really easy for this to get away from us. So if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask, or maybe even a follow-up from our Joe Illidge conversation from last week. That was last week, wasn't it? No, Xander Cannon was last week. Sorry, I'm running out of runway. Xander was a fantastic guest. I hope if you missed that episode, that you go back to the archives and check it out. And you know, we'll just go from there. Mike and Steve, there was a little bit of a question early on. Kurt's Pencils, you know my man Kurt's Pencils. When we were talking about the old school of how to try to, you know, back in the day before there was FTP and, you know, Dropbox. Kirk says, would you rather do it the old way or the new way? Is there anything romantic about how you used to do it, Mike, versus now? Or how to even like turn in files?
I would much, if I could go back in time, I would hoard 1 million bottles of good ink and all those great brushes and all that great marble paper, because the paper today is just crap. All of it. No matter who makes it, it is shit compared to the paper that I still have some of it.
Yeah. Is it yellowing at all? The old stuff?
No, but it's the rag content. So like when you would make paper, there was a cotton fiber and the actual rag, they'd actually put what they call the rag content in the paper. And the higher the rag content, the more sturdy. I don't know if I have okay, I do. Here's an actual piece of plastic marble paper. Hear that sound?
It sounds like a storm door.
Right. Now, let's see if I can find
a drum head.
Right. So I will find a piece of modern paper. It's just
garbage. Don't you know? You're killing our ratings. Get that off the screen.
That is Strathmore, right?
Yeah,
That's Strathmore 300 series cold press. This stuff was. When you hold this, it's like so smooth, but you really feel the difference. So it can take a pen. It can take a pen. It can take a brush. It doesn't bleed.
There's a spider web or anything like that.
Right, like if you buy that Canton stuff, if you ink with it with a marker, okay. But even sometimes you use a brush, it would you would get parts of it that would spider, right? So I there's nobody of my age or near my age who doesn't complain about the quality of the art supplies just not being as good. Now, you can still buy old pen points, but the ink, even the new Pelican ink, which is supposedly like the formula of the old Pelican ink, it's just not. It's not. So it's like you have to get used to the tools not being as good, you know, and it does affect the ease at which you work. So
I think that's interesting because we saw maybe, what was it, a month or two ago when the cola race shortage happened and everybody was running the cop all the blue cola race pencils because they kind of pulled the brand. And I remember in early eBay, I had a lot of come ups because I was just looking for art supplies, you know, rather than the Alyssa Milano Maxim cover. And, you know, I think I got a gross of color race blue pencils back then.
Wow.
For what, $40? You know,
become a hoarder. That's one of the things I learned from Al Williamson. He hoarded. He would buy like grosses of pen points, grosses of brushes. He would buy a ton of stuff. And we used to do that. We would go all in. He and Blevins and I would go in. We would make these huge purchases, because, you know, one, you never want to run. You never want to be like on your last bottle of ink when you're working on your job, right? You don't want to. It's like when you have two, and you crack the bottle on the first one of the last two, you always order more, right? You never get down to the last one because you never know in today's time when you go to oh yeah, I'll go and order more of these markers. Oh, discontinued,
Right.
out of stock, right?
There was a point, especially in Philly, because Philly is filthy with cartoonists, that the art supply store was always just empty. Wherever the tech pins were, or the microns, or
Utrecht was like that.
Yeah, Utrecht was always empty because somebody would
have it in the beginning of the semester when the kids would come in and buy for that semester, and then gone, nothing until the next, to the next semester. So,
well, a lot of that changed when we're getting. Somebody's getting the echo. A lot of things changed when you could start ordering online, and then everybody figured out where to get the good stuff online too.
I don't think most young people, at least most of my students, didn't order online. They would always either go to, well, Utrecht got bought out by Blick, so everybody would go to Blick, right? And there was artists and craftsmen. They would go there, but most everybody walked around the corner, a couple blocks to dig Blick. But art students don't tend to stock up because they're very budget conscious.
Yeah. The art students taking exactly what they can get, and they're not getting extra. They're usually complaining about what they're buying in the first place. Why is this stuff so expensive? They're not buying 6 or something. So, guys, does somebody have, maybe if somebody has like a YouTube or something open in their browser, if you close that?
No, I only have this one.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I don't know what just happened, but that sounds better. Thank you. So, Thomas,
Great Kazoo. Thank you, Great Kazoo.
Thank you, Dum Dums. America's Tom Zoller. Let's salute America's Tom Zoller, the hero the city needs. Says, poor Mike. The students are poor. That's the word you're looking for.
Well, going to art school will make you poor.
Your buddy Shelley says you don't buy bulk until you bond with the tool.
Right. If you like something, you buy a lot of it.
So, but I also wonder now if anybody's doing that at all, right? Because it's like everybody's so digital. I know there's smart things to do, like if you have an Apple Pencil, if that's what you're doing, you should have an Apple Pencil on deck somewhere in your studio, just in case that breaks. No?
Yeah, I worry about that. I worry about that, the tools that I use and have been using can be discontinued. The software I'm using could go away. You probably want to keep an old operating system going. It's weird that you have to think about those things. You got to worry about file formats in that way. So there's a digital analog to that.
A digital hoard.
Yeah, for sure. But I know I've got like a zip drive or a floppy disk drive somewhere just in case. But I haven't found myself hoarding in that way, like too many Apple Pencils. I do have a backup one, but that's about it.
Right, and I mean, just
I did buy extras of the glove I use when I draw.
Mm-hmm.
So if that goes away, I want to have a backup or two.
I mean, it's very easy enough to be drawing and you drop your pencil and then you roll over it in your chair because you're trying to pick it up. And you've crushed it, and now what? You know what I'm saying? So
I had to order an extra. I actually have another backup of this.
Yeah.
Because was it 2 years ago, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
One day I'm drawing, and I'm getting these weird lines shooting off in my Cintiq, and I can't figure out what's going on. I thought, oh, maybe the software was messed up or whatever. Finally, I used somebody else's stylus. Somehow the stylus got messed up. And so, but I'm at the end. They don't make this 13-inch Cintiq anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I ordered an extra pen. When I bought that pen, I bought two.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because
not even the nibs, like the whole pen.
The whole pen.
Yeah.
I don't think the nibs have as much to do with the line as
they do wear down.
Yeah, they do wear down, but the real issue was somewhere in that little clicky part of the pen,
like the front joint.
Yeah, that was jacked up. So, I mean, everything you use. Oh, you got.
So Jamar has a new mouse. And he really doesn't like it. It has an extra button, and he did it again. His new mouse has too many buttons, and so he's not going to be stocking up on this particular mouse.
No, this mouse is going to go in the trash. Trash mouse.
We were just saying that you're not going to stock up on this particular mouse. No.
I got to fix that. Continue. I'm sorry. Oh, Shelley says, I do have packs of felt nibs. I hate the plastic ones. I had a couple in my old Cintiq. They had, as I told you guys, I traded out. I'm not a Wacom guy anymore. I'm a Huion guy now. But on my last Cintiq, I did trade out the plastic nibs for the felt ones. And that felt, pun intended, a lot better to draw with. But that was just me.
Somewhere there's just giant piles of all these old screens and texts and tablets and everything. You figure, man, if you have a 50-year career, what is your footprint of all the tech that you probably filled a landfill with your printers and screens and computers and discs and.
Well, I think that's an interesting conversation, and maybe I'll quiz all of the cartoonists that are watching and us also. What piece of tech have you gone through the most? And I will hazard to say, if it's not your computer, it's probably your scanner or printer or some sort of like mix of the two. I think I've gone through more printers in my career than I have other devices. And your printer always goes in the worst the worst moment. And a lot of the cartoonists, from our side of the pool at least, have all-in-ones. Like it's a scanner, facsimile machine,
Toaster.
It slices and dices.
Cut your
And
grass.
and by the time you get ahead to a point, either it will only scan or it won't make copies anymore, or
You can't buy the ink anymore.
right, the ink or something, or your computer's OS changed, and now it won't see the device anymore. So like the drivers are incompatible, and you wind up losing it that way.
I went through that with my brother. So I bought a new one, a new all-in-one, and then I used was it ViewScan?
ViewScan. Shout out to my man, Mr. ViewScan.
I don't know what happened over the course of a weekend. It was working fine one day. The next time I went to scan it, it wouldn't. So I use the ViewScan. I can't really print on it, so I had to go buy another printer. But basically, you expect that 3 years is the life of anything you can expect now. 3 years,
and it's probably getting shorter as tech gets
right. Like if you buy a new computer now, in 3 years, that's considered to be an old. And then where you buy it in the life of that particular model. Do you buy it when it first comes out? Do you buy it in the middle? Or do you buy it at the end when they go like, yeah, well, we're not making any more drivers for that. Like shit. Right?
Yeah, that's real. Yeah.
So
I've been getting about 6 or 7 years out of my Macs, which seems to be like a pretty good lifespan, maybe longer than that. The printer's lasting pretty long. I think if I replace anything more frequently, it was my iPad. It lasted 6 years, and then I had to buy a new one. So I don't know. I'm not sure why the equipment might be failing. I always get Apple protection. Maybe that's they won't sabotage it if you're paying the protection money.
And Steve, what makes your iPad go south? Is there's no more disk space?
The screen died.
The screen goes. Okay.
Yeah. It started with a failure of a pixel column, and then soon thereafter it was non-responsive.
Well, as we get older, Steve, pixels fail us, and it's just a fact of life at this point.
Yeah, but it never happened before, I swear.
It's all right, baby. It happens to the best of us.
Right. Get some free Viagra.
Our buddy America's Tom Zoller says disk drives. Seriously, I'm running a Drobo. Shout out to Drobo. We talked about Drobo a couple of weeks ago. A RAID-ish system to make sure that I have all my files and enough room for them. And for some reason, I'm hard on drives. Pause. Also, I can see from here 4 in the Drobo for 12 terabytes. That's almost like a teraflop or whatever. Isn't that the next thing up? A flop. And a 4 terabyte external and 2 smaller externals as part of my crazy backup plan. Yo, you're running a NORAD system in your studio. You're going to ask the thing to play a game.
And then in reality, you need to have that backed up somewhere off site. Because if your house burns down, it doesn't matter what you got. You can have 100 bajillion terabytes, but if it all gets burnt up, so.
Do you think people aren't as precious with that anymore because of the cloud? You know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, I have it on the cloud, so I'm not worried about it.
I don't know. I mean,
or even I even equate the cloud not to just be like the Apple cloud, but like you have a Dropbox, and that's like an off-site thing that you're paying money for every month to make sure it's up.
Well, one of the discussions I have with a lot of people is those who have resisted are now running into the fact that they're going to have to buy a new computer. And when they buy a new computer, they're going to have to buy the new version of, Adobe or whatever.
Yeah.
Now you're going to be down to where you're paying every month, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all these corporations, I mean, Disney just announced in the last 2 weeks that they're not going to be making DVDs anymore. So
What?
you want to watch anything in the future, you're going to have to subscribe to Disney, and you're going to have to pay them every month. And if you want to watch Little Mermaid, you're going to have to pay money to watch it, because they're not going to be making any more DVDs of the Little Mermaid. They're not going to be releasing stuff on DVD, and so everybody is basically moving towards that model where you're never going to be able to actually own anything unless you're actually buying an old version of it, like you buy an old CD. But you better hope they keep making CD players. Like, nobody's computer now has a CD in it. I have a external CD player, but nobody's computers, modern computers, have CD drives in them. So you better hope that somebody continues to make, because I have a gazillion. I've probably 5,000 CDs.
And that's funny. Like, I'm a Mac guy, and the new iMacs keep coming out, and they're slimmer and sexier. But I think the last one that actually had a disk drive in it was like the 2009s.
Right.
And they just haven't had them, and people were like, "Oh, that's so sexy," or the MacBook Airs, they're so thin. I'm like, "Yo, I need a disk drive." So a lot of Mac users have super drives is what they call them, like the little external.
Right, that's what I have.
Yeah.
How many people are actually using the kind of power you need from the current systems? I understand if you're running some animation or you're doing some After Effects work, but for the most part, if you're even doing page layouts or anything in Photoshop, how much juice do you really need? How is your computer really slowing down? How big are these files that we're talking about? On the iPad, I understand, because the first generation compared to the fifth is, those 5 generations are, well represented by the speed and the capacity. But I just don't feel the need to upgrade my devices so often. Getting back to the cloud for a moment, I wasn't that big a fan of it because I'd back up locally. But then when my iPad failed, and it basically became, it's not like when your hard drive fails or your Mac fails, the operating system fails, but the hard drive's intact and they can still get data off of it. When the iPad failed, it failed big and
spectacularly.
Yeah, it was done. And I lost stuff off of that. Since then, I've been on the cloud, just so I always have a backup of it. And I have files also on Dropbox that gives me some peace of mind. But, whatever Tom's doing here is he's describing, it feels like that's what I should be doing.
Right. Yeah. Tom's meeting people in a parking lot garage and handing off manila envelopes. That's what it sounds like he's doing.
Well, this ties into one of our part one or part, the cost of being an artist in today's modern world means that you have to consider all these other technical things about how you store your art, how you store your files. Because let's say you are producing a volume of work, not necessarily even the volume of work if you were working for Marvel and DC, but your own work, right? Your own IP, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to continue to access that, right? And that's value. If you're a cartoonist in your 20s, by the time you're in your 40s, you will have produced, thousands of pages.
Tens of pages.
Right, tens of pages. That, especially if you're not working for somebody else, but you're working for yourself, right. That's your treasure.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's your treasure. You've got to be able to continually access that if you want to be able to reprint it. I mean, nobody is storing film anymore.
Right.
Right? It used to be that they would store the film. So you'd want to go back and reprint it. The printer might actually have the film.
Right.
right? Like
Right.
they would do that with the old marbles and stuff. They actually had, when they didn't have the art, they actually had film that they could go back and reprint.
Right.
Well, nobody's doing that anymore.
Yeah, if they had the film now, they wouldn't know what to do with it.
Well, if you have the film now, you actually have to scan it,
Right. Yeah.
right? Like scanning a negative, right? For
Right.
photography, right?
Yeah.
I have slides. I had like what they used to call
Like a carousel.
oh yeah, but there was also like larger like full color beautiful photographic prints.
Right.
But they're translucent. It had a name, but that's how the artwork was delivered not too long ago.
That's wild.
Now, I
So
don't even know if there's a scanner now that can even handle scanning those things.
I have a question, because this is interesting. We're talking about this. What about paper? Because like one of a cartoonist's dream things is to have a flat file in the studio. If you have one of those, they're the heaviest things on earth.
Right.
Like in the Marvel handbook, the Hulk can lift 3 flat files. So like, how are you archiving like original pages these days? There was a point where I had a bunch of those Itoya presentation folders to keep jobs in, and then as I've been drawing more like volumes of things, I'm not going to buy 6 of those. You know what I'm saying? So like, do you have like archival things? Or Mike, this is a perfect question for Mike Manley, because you're swimming in original pages. How do you store all that stuff?
I have an armoire in the other room that has no room in it. Right? It is a 6-foot. It's a 6-foot cabinet filled from floor to ceiling with pages.
Yeah.
Right. So what I was doing for a while was having Mimi and Liang going through and organizing everything, all my drawings, all my pages. I have a flat file here. I have 2 flat files in here. I'm over there, and a flat file in the attic. I stopped buying flat files.
Right.
One of the reasons I went to digital on the strips was that, after you got 4,000 originals, it's
right.
literally a giant block of art. So
you have to reinforce your floor at some point, right?
Right.
It's just,
Yeah.
Like so now I do the Judge digitally, and I've actually been doing the Phantom digitally. I would prefer to do it traditionally, just because that's my aesthetic.
Right.
But you just have to be able to adapt.
Right.
Like I was talking to you guys. I'm working on developing a graphic novel, and that's one of the things I have to sort of decide. Do I want to do it digital? Do I want to draw it and ink it digital? Do I want to do it all digital, or do I want to do it traditional because there might be some value in the pages? Because my old art from my Marvel and DC years, some of it is worth a considerable amount of money, right? However, I don't know, and that's because of nostalgia, right? Because what drives comics is nostalgia. What drives the direct market is the nostalgia. That block of people between 35 and 65 that's slowly moving, slowly aging. And those are the people that become wealthy and buy old art, right?
Right.
But if I have let's say if I get these projects off the ground, these people are going to be teenagers, so they're not going to be buying art. So, and if you're producing a graphic novel, you got to produce hundreds of pages.
Right.
So one of the things is to consider: do I do the art because I want to have the physical, the physical? I love the physical. My aesthetic is the physical because that's how I formed. Or do I go, I'm going to do it digital because I can work faster. And I just embrace moving over and working that way. I mean, I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. It's just sort of a personal answer.
Right.
But it seems to me that a lot of the younger cartoonists start out embracing the digital, not the traditional. Their issue will be storage and the security of the storage, right, from the very beginning. And everybody I know has lost files, right? So if you lose your computer goes down, your iPad goes down, your thing, if I have a paper backup, I can always rescan my pages, right? I can always recolor my pages. But if it was all done digital, I'm screwed.
Right.
Yeah, both approaches have their weaknesses, right?
Right. Right. Both approaches have their weaknesses, but I would say that I have never lost a page of original art, but I have lost digital art.
So, Mike, speaking of this, our good buddy Shelley, please read Dick Tracy. What are you doing with your life if you're not reading Shelley's Dick Tracy in your local paper? Nobody's originals have ever been messed up by silverfish, I hope. First, off the bat, silverfish is one of the grossest things I've ever seen. And I guess they eat paper. I don't know what silverfish's stats are, but that sounds really gross.
Yeah,
and how do you get those?
I don't have any silverfish. But it is, it does become over the course of your career. Like I have a huge block of artwork, and I have a huge block of paintings. Just like you could just fill a giant cube full of my paintings, a giant cube full of all my original art. And I have my way. I'll live to be 100 and still be drawing. So, but again, that's something that I have to sort of question, because also everything that I have, I'm working on, besides my iPad, which I bought. Everything is at the end of its production. So I can't update my computer. I can't update my operating system. Any day the Cintiq is going to get messed up. So what I'm looking at is probably sometime next year buying a whole new system.
Right.
That I will switch over to before this one goes down, so that I'll still have this. Because again, part of the thing about digital, if this goes down, I'm screwed. Right?
Yeah.
If this goes down, and I'm actually questioning, do I want to use Wacom? Do I want to try buying a Huion and seeing how that works? Is that going to be easier?
This is the perfect time to get a new sponsorship. What do you think?
Because I think that they're not a great company as far as their service, as far as their helping you with stuff. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's all about ease of production. That's the most important thing.
Well, I'm sorry, Mike. One of the things that I'm really enjoying about where we are right now is that options are opening up. I know there's a lot of loyalists to Wacom's brand because that's kind of where that was all there was for a long time. And just over the last 5 years, Huion stepped up and they just kind of they're really kicking a lot of butt in X-Pen, and there's a couple of other brands that are basically doing the same thing that these guys are doing for a lot cheaper. And a lot cheaper. Like when I got my Huion, I have, what is this? I have like a 20-inch joint over here. And I could have bought, for the price of the same size Wacom, I could have bought 4 of these things. You know,
do they last long or do they burn out?
This thing is fine. I can't remember. I bought this like 2 or 3 years ago.
The color is good, you know, all that kind of stuff.
No driver drama, none of that. It just works. You know what I'm saying? And we all know that a lot of our colleagues spend a lot of time grousing about trying to find a fix for what's wrong with their Wacom today.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's just, you know, again, my whole role as the crusty critic back on Draw Magazine was to help you out of these spots, you know, and not to get in these positions where you're kind of stuck in the middle of fire. So, you know, I think there's other options out there. There's a lot of YouTubers who that's their whole deal is just comparing these different types of devices in the last 5 years. And it's good to do your homework. And also, I think somebody said in the chat, what we're doing isn't rocket science to a degree. You probably don't need this mega super thing to draw your comic strip, you know, but when you need to use it, it should be able to work.
Yeah, I'm editing video, and even when I am editing video, it's probably the most basic of editing videos. It's just taking a video of what I drew, a screen, you know, recording, and then just speeding it up 8x so that people don't fall asleep and get bored. Like, oh,
right,
it's inking so slow.
Yeah, when I'm editing trailers and videos like that, things like that in After Effects or running processes with Premiere, they can take a while. I long for faster processing for things like that. But for the most part, when it comes to all this tech, it seems to be, it's kind of cool that it kind of suits, what's the one that suits you?
Right.
Like what fits you better. Some people just like the form factor of the Cintiq. They want the buttons where the buttons are. They're used to that. It's sort of like moving things on their desk. They want things where they are. And so if a iPad is what works for you, if a other tablet works for you. I mean, there's no wrong way.
Yeah, I have a friend who just went through that, got a new Wacom. But by the time they, got the arm and went through everything and they set it all up, they're like, wait a minute, the buttons are not, and it's like muscle memory. I'm so used to this one.
Right, you're doing this, and it's not there anymore. Yeah. It's over there.
Playing an accordion.
Yeah. And so you were used to playing an accordion, and now it's like a trombone. It's like, wait a minute, And there's a lot of, when I draw traditionally, there's just me, and there's no interface. There's nothing to slow my process. I can just work. I can flow. Digital never flows because there's always like, what? Restart. There's between me and the thing I'm creating, there's this barrier of software. The performance of the software. So, to me, it's all about ease. When I'm really cooking, zoom in, zoom out, it's got to be, what if I have to zoom out, zoom, it's like, I don't like that.
No, I feel you on that. And there's also the thing, I was going to say something kind of about, that workflow again. And our good buddy Christophe, bonjour Christophe, who says, whatever works for you, he agrees with Steve. I believe that. And you'll never hear me on here saying, you guys, you got to go out and buy this thing. Never said things like that. Everybody's working on different price points and levels. And I've, come to, I have something I was going to say. I've come to this idolization that sometimes you see that sexy thing in the window and it's like a 32-inch Wacom or whatever. You're like, yo. But sometimes having that much real estate kind of messes with your art, So I'm kind of running out of how to say this, but you know what I'm saying?
I don't know whether the fact is, if you're working on a comic, right, you might be able to zoom out and see the whole page, which might be nice. But the fact is, then when you're working, you're still working. You have a 57-inch screen, but you're still working in this little area, right?
hmm And you're running the risk of noodling when you're working so small in a small spot, or working so big in a small spot. When you actually look at the whole document, you'll probably lose all of the fidelity of the thing you're drawing. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I guess that's where my years of experience helped me, because I know when I reduce it down to what appears to be original size, I know, like, oh, that's going to be too thin, right? So now I got my digital thing down.
I'd like the software to. I'd like a setting where we could tell Clip Studio or Procreate maximum magnification. I don't let me zoom in more than 400%. I want to be able to set that so I don't find myself. Oh, let me just. I'm creating this character. I'll start working by sculpting their DNA. I want to be prevented from getting too far in. I used to keep an eye on that when I'm working on all my original comics 30 years ago were all vector, and so you can zoom in almost indefinitely. But beyond 800%, it's not going to print. You're drawing things smaller than the DPI, right? It's pixel art at that point. So
be a word.
So
I'd love to be able to limit myself.
And that's also the difference between working digitally, that's later going to be printed, and working digitally, that's going to be shown digitally, right? Like if you're doing a digital comic that's going to be shown on a screen, it's different than if you're doing a digital comic where you're drawing digitally, it's going to be printed in offset.
Right.
That's going to be and that's like a learning curve for a lot of people to actually have the first time you see your work in print, right? That's a big learning experience, because you go, oh, I thought that line was fat. Or I thought, oh, why are my lines? Why did that all drop out? Or, geez, this guy poured a whole bunch of ugly ass dark color on top of something and I can't see anything.
No, you did that, right?
Just like when you look at something on your screen and then you see that in print, right? How much darker it is, all that kind of stuff that you're not even thinking about when you're working digital, but when you work in print, it's a huge learning curve.
Yeah, I was going to add, and this is just maybe from seeing a lot of young cartoonists who were trained to work digitally. I've seen kind of like I would call it a tick, like a TIC, like a nervous tick of never being happy with a line or a curve. And you know what I'm talking about, Mike. Well, you see a lot of digital artists who will do a line, undo, do a line, undo, do a circle, undo, do a circle, undo. And it's almost like it happens so fast. It's almost like, I don't even know if they're registering that they're making this mark. It's almost like you're getting into the habit of hitting that command, as a command Z, so much that you don't even allow yourself to make the mark.
Well, it's also not a flow. I mean, when you really get in that zone, which would always happen to me if I've been inking all day, but somehow after dinner and whatever, I would always have that sweet spot between like 10:30 and 4 in the morning. However, I would burn. I could do more. I would be flowing more in those after hours, and you're working, the page too wet, you put the line, you hop on the other page, you're just going, and and so it's not like, oh, I ink this way, no, I don't like it, shh, erase, ink this way, no, shh, erase, ink this way. It's not. I don't believe it's a good. It's sort of stunting, I think. I encourage everyone even if you're working digitally, to spend a lot of time working traditionally, because I think you develop stronger skills and you actually understand what you want. And if you can reproduce it traditionally, you will do it better digitally, you know? But yeah, I would, as a teacher, I would see that people just like you said, it was almost like a tick. They would like, do this thing, 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 over and over and over and over again. And it's like, you know, I would have eaten 10 things by that time, right? And it's just, to me, that's not a natural creative process, you know?
But somebody said in this earlier, is like, I think it was Shelley who was like, you know, young people don't know what they don't know, or like if you didn't have it before, you don't know it was better than what you have now.
I said that the other day. I was commenting on a post by Howard Chaykin, and that's one thing that I came to learn specifically because when I was in school as a student. I was teaching classes, and I was a full-time professional. And what you realize is that 17, 18, 19-year-old students are choosing to be an artist. They have the dream. Nobody knows how to walk that path. Their friends, their family, good proportion of their teachers don't. A good proportion of the teachers who are, or the people who are trying to get you to go to the school, they go, yeah, you know, you want to do that? Yeah, we teach you. We do all that here. You know, if you want to be a cartoonist, unless another cartoonist is advising you, it's really sketchy because you choose the wrong school, you choose the wrong mentor, you choose the wrong program. And then what happens is you spend a couple years, a lot of money, and realize, yeah, I'm not really getting what I want. I'm not really getting what I need. But of course, when you're 17, you don't know. Oh, you need to be doing these things. You need to be doing that thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're following what the teachers of the school or the university says. Well, this is our program. This is what you need to do. And I always say it's like being a doctor. Being a cartoonist, being a professional cartoonist, it's the same amount of time it takes to be a doctor. 4 or 5 years, build basic skill set, and 4 or 5 years of working from that into your specialty, right? To get good, to actually start really growing, right? Nobody wants to hear that, right? Nobody wants to hear 10 years, 10,000 hours, because that doesn't sound satisfying, right? But it's the reality whether you want to.
It sounds like a lot of work, Mike.
It is. It is. It is. It's a lot of work. It is. There's no.
Yeah, but just tell me the trick. Just tell me
the
one.
The thing is, why is that bad? That, to me, why is that bad? Why is it bad that it's a lot of work? Why is it bad that it's hard or it's difficult when you start out? Why is that a bad thing, right? I never felt that was a concern or a bad thing. You know, it's frustrating, right? You get frustrated. You tear up something you don't like. You're frustrated with where you are. But I never, ever felt like drawing and practicing to get better was a bad thing. And again, I'm self-taught with cartooning, right? I didn't go to university. I never had a class on how to graphic narrative or any of that stuff. You know, I had a handful of books. The rest of it came from study and practice and analyze.
You learned it in the street.
Yeah. You know, well, I wasn't in the street. I was in my bedroom, but you couldn't be on the street because you got to be inside, right? I don't understand that, and I think that is actually not a good mindset to have. I think you should embrace the fact that if you want to be a black belt, it's not easy, right? Somehow with visual art, it always seems like, well, there's got to be some way of like
hacking it, right?
Yeah, of circumventing it. And you know, none of the people I admired, or none of the people who are successful,
JAMAR Nicholas.
everybody spent all that time. You know, somebody might be better at figure drawing, but not be good at storytelling. You know, or they might be really good at penciling, but not really good at inking. Right? Everybody is all over the place, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is that we live in a time now where if you were 17, 18, 16, thinking about doing this, well, now there's all this how to that didn't exist. But do you know, can you vet it? Can you find the stuff that's really got the stuff that's important and really helpful? And do you have the, you know, the drive or the discipline? I think it's really the discipline to be able to, if you love it.
That's really the part there. I think that's the key. It's all, of course it's work. Of course it's all those things. Of course it's 10,000 hours. And of course it's an uphill battle. But if you're not having fun, part of why we were doing this all is because some of us were having so much fun doing this thing before we thought about it as a career, before we thought about it as a way to pay the bills. And that kind of momentum, that kind of, as long as you can hold on to that, I think it helps you get through those tougher bumps in the road. Because, man, when you draw something right, even if you only like it for 10 minutes, 15 minutes from now, you're going to hate it. But for those 10 minutes, that honeymoon period with that illustration, that's a high. And, that's something. So I think it's those things. It's those things that, for me, helped me through those rough patches.
I mean, you really, it's fun.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that something that is fun cannot be difficult.
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially when you're getting to the point where you're like, you're trying to make it that much better. Once you get to the point where you're at the 10,000 hours and you can now tell what's right and wrong, and you tell the difference between something that's 99% right and 100% right, and you're trying to that difference there, or not even right, between what you want it to be and what it is, and trying to jump that chasm is so challenging, and so many face plants, but every once in a while you land it just right.
Well, even when you think of, okay, you say the 10,000 hours, when you've got 500 hours, you're better. You can do something. When you got 1,500 hours or 2,000 hours, right, you will actually be able to see progress if you apply yourself, right? So, part of it is when we're young, we're always very impatient. But I still think that cartooning, even though there's all this how-to or stuff, it's really, there's not like 600 years of oil painting, right? We can look back hundreds of years at, from the Renaissance on, painting figures in oil, and each generation building upon the previous. We haven't really been doing comic books that long, right? We haven't been doing comics like not even 100 years yet. Comic strips longer than comic books, but it's still, I think only mainly through the fact that the movies and all that stuff, it's only been what, not 10 years that the school I went to actually have had an illustration program, and in that illustration program you could probably learn how to do graphic narrative, right? It hasn't been around that long, right? So again, if the average person said, "Oh, I want to learn how to do comics," well, you can go take a course, but it might be like, "Hey, we're gonna draw a pineapple and put two things and whatever." And like, "Oh, now we made a weird super rhino man." Hey, that kind of general, kind of sort of cartooning. But if you're actually going to
kind of like an adult school cartooning class, is that what you mean?
right, yeah, because
Yeah.
I've taught classes like that, and
Mhm.
but if you want to do narrative storytelling, where you're creating dramas where people are going to really connect emotionally to the story you're trying to tell, that's very difficult and requires a combination of skills. It requires a combination of skills. And, do you want to do a strip? Do you want to do humor? Do you want to do scary stuff? Do you want to do super action adventure? Each one of those requires a specific skill set. And I don't think yet there still is there's no program that I'm aware of where you really get that.
Right. I mean, and like, this isn't a knock on anybody's program, because, if SVA was around when I was a kid and I wanted to go to art school for cartooning. And Kubert, I told you guys I didn't think Kubert was real because I saw it next to the X-Ray Specs ad in the back of the Conan magazines. Shout out to my man Tom Zoller, great Kubert alum. And if I had really known that was a thing, I probably would have tried to press to go there. But SCAD has a great program. Mike has got a program. I think something just opened up at, I forget. They're popping up all over the place. The Center for Cartoon Studies. Yeah. And they're almost like, Mike will talk about kind of like the old painting masters. There were schools of painters, right? And I think you're starting to see that same thing in comics as far as how you were taught or who you were taught under. Kind of bring this back around to mentorship. Think about the SVA guys who have more of a mainstream style because, Walt taught them or Klaus taught them or those kind of things, right? Versus, James Sturm guys at the Center of Cartoon Studies. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I'm just kind of making conversation. I think it's interesting and that comics is so broad, you could have that conversation about, who you studied under in school, if that's a route you took. But no, I also agree with Mike that, you go to the wrong place, you might get a miseducation.
So well, I think that whether you are Chris Ware or Jack Kirby, there are formal qualities to doing narrative storytelling in the comic book format that you need to be able to grasp, irrespective of genre or style. Just the way comics work visually.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And I don't know a program that I'm aware of that kind of covers all the bases. You know what I mean? It's more like they kind of do superhero stuff or they kind of do the Chris Ware kind of a thing. I'm not aware of a program that has a deep bench, where you
learn all of it, right?
Do all of it, yeah. Because I would think, like, if I was running a school, I think you would have a beginning year where you would sort of experiment with all of that to be aware of it.
This is interesting, Mike. Continue, and then we're going to get out of here. Like the Mike Manley School of Cartooning would look like what?
Well, it would be a lot of, there would be a history of cartooning. Right?
Sure.
Studying. There would be a history of the strips and who begot who, just so you know where we came from, right? Because that's very important. And then you would learn the formal qualities of each particular format, right? And then you would have assignments to work in those particular formats on top of anatomy and perspective
Mm-hmm.
and composition, narrative composition. Because that's one of the two greatest weaknesses of most young cartoonists are perspective and composition, or narrative composition, the psychology of composition. You know, it's not just jamming something in. You know what I mean? And so I think if you worked in a comic strip style and you worked in a comic book style, I think you end up being stronger. It's just sort of like when you go to art school to learn how to paint. They have you do things like still lifes, which, you know, people are like, well, a still life could be a composition. A still life can actually have narrative. A still life can also just be a technical exercise to learn how to articulate in various media certain surfaces, right? Certain techniques, so that when you're actually working, you actually have the skill to do the thing that you want to do, right? It's like the same in music, right? You learn all these basic things, or writing, you learn the basic things so that then you can do, or martial arts. You use the basic katas so that you can learn the more complex moves. So like when I was taking karate a couple years ago, I didn't keep going because I was too busy, but I was learning all the basic moves, and all the more complex moves are based off the basic moves. So that's what I'm talking about. But I do think with cartooning, most people come in, and you want to regurgitate what you like, right? Most young art students, when they're in animation, want to regurgitate whatever their favorite show is, and are not necessarily aware of the whole thing, right?
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense.
So if I was teaching a cartooning school, that's what it would be. Your first year would be all that real. Actually, all 4 years would be anatomy, figure drawing, and perspective, and all that stuff, because the average art school just does not give anybody enough time to get good at that. There's some people that are naturally can look at something and have good eye-hand coordination and can sort of put that down, but then drawing from imagination, fall apart.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And cartooning is 99% drawing from recall.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not drawing. You're not drawing what you see. You're drawing what you think.
That's deep, bro.
Right. And people really think about it that way, but that's really what it is. Drawing. You're calling upon stored information and your knowledge and your facility to be able to express that information. So if I was teaching, it would be very different than I think most programs are. So
this would be a perfect time to stump for Mike's atelier.
I don't think it'll ever happen, but if that was something I was doing.
I love it. Well, guys, we ran out of runway. As I'd like to say every week, where does the time go? You guys just sat in on a fly on the wall conversation between 3 expert cartoonists. Yes. And what I also love about our community is that the live chat room is filthy with cartoonists, right? There's a lot of superstars that hang out with us, and I appreciate it. That means that the rich ore of content we have is you find purchase every Wednesday at 8 p.m. here. You'll get something out of it. JRD just says part 6, maybe. I don't know. I enjoy these just as much as I enjoy having a guest, even when I can remember who it was last week. So But to be respectful of Steve and his illness, we're gonna get out of here and let him, put a towel over his head and eat soup or whatever he's got to do. We thank you, and you guys. This is a great episode. If you are new to the channel, please like, subscribe, drop kick that alert button, and go back and check out our archives. It's real deep. Pause. All right. So feel better, Steve. Thanks, Tony. It's great to see you. For Mike, sick Steve, and myself, Steve's already sick, so I think it's really important that you
extra washing.
That's right. Wash those curvy hands. Thank you. Thanks, Sam Hart. Thanks, Shelly. And that's right. With 6, we get egg roll. Wow. We'll go back in the 70s. I love it. All right, you guys. We'll see you on the other side. Go to bed.